not because I named it that way, but it's a gift idea that I came up with like 4 years ago. And it's got just a whole bunch of herbs, and I'm gonna be showing you how to make it. And what happened with that was that I sent it off to like a whole bunch of friends, and one of my friends wrote back and she said, "Hey, can you give me the recipe? Because my boy, who was at that time 12 years old, her son, she said, it was addicted to your sprinkle." So, and he called it a magic sprinkle. And so I gave her the recipe, and she's a pharmacist. And so she said, "You know what? I'm kind of wondering, what is it that makes him so attracted to this food? Because normally boys of that age don't particularly like doing things like rosemary and sage and that kind of stuff. They want just like a burger and fries and Coke, right? And here's suddenly this boy, craving this weird recipe." And she said, "I think it's the iodine in it." And fair enough, she tested him, and it turned out that he was very low on iodine. And every time that he had that sprinkle, he made a connection that made him really energetic. And suddenly his basketball game became really good. He became so much more energetic. So the name remained, I now call it the magic sprinkle, and that's from my friend Erica. And I want to show you, just the power of herbs, what we can do to make it a wonderful sprinkle as a gift for the holiday season that's coming up. Now, before I dive into the recipe, I want to kind of urge you a little bit to kind of consider, give it a second thought of where you're shopping. I know many of you have shopped on Black Friday, and I hope you're supporting a lot of small businesses. I want to share with you one statistic. That is, did you know that 1 out of 7 businesses, there's only 1 in 7 businesses in small business that actually survives, right? So majority of small businesses actually fail within less than 3 years. And I can tell you, as a small business owner, and a lot of my friends who are small business owners, we work a lot. It's a daily, monthly struggle about where the salaries are going to be paid, where's the money going to come from, what about the expenses, what about the legal stuff, what about sales and marketing, and this is just an endless pursuit. It's very different when you work for someone. Your job is defined, right? So it would be really lovely, and if you haven't gotten your gifts yet, is to support independent stores in your town, in your city, right? Or farmers markets, or if you're buying something online, there's something like Etsy where people make their own stuff, or go and visit our All Things We Love. Jean, if we could pop the directory URL for that. It's a really wonderful place where we, if you haven't seen that yet, it's a place where we have curated products for you that I truly believe in, and I use it in my personal life, but my team members also are fanatical about these companies. And I can tell you that we evaluate every day companies. There's so much greenwashing going on. I plan to do an expose about that. But anyway, so that's one way of, I think, gifting, right? And then the other way of gifting is if you have the time, resources, creativity, and the passion for using food as a gift, I feel like making something for someone is the most wonderful way you can offer them something, and especially when it comes to food. How many times have you received something from someone that was handmade, right? And how touching is that when you receive it versus when something that somebody bought from Macy's on a sale? It's just never the same, right? So in today's recipe, on today's video, I would love to share with you the magic sprinkle, and we're gonna be using. It's basically a sprinkle that you put on top of eggs, rice, vegetables. It just brightens up anything that it's a really great spice, basically. The 3 herbs that we're going to be using is rosemary. This would be your sage and thyme. I probably don't need to sell you on that. They are the trinity, if you will, in Western herbalism. They're so important. I'm especially in love with thyme because thyme is highly anti-inflammatory. And for those of you who struggle with histamine problems, thyme actually lowers your histamine, which is awesome. We're going to be using some salt in here. We're going to be using sesame seeds, which actually, let me just actually get started with the sesame seeds because we're going to be roasting them just to depart a lot more flavor in them. Sesame seeds on their own, they're kind of flat and bland. But when you roast them, this is when really the flavor really, you're imparting a lot of the wonderful flavor. And then we're using dulse, which is basically kind of a seaweed. And I want to tell you about it in a second, about the amazing qualities of iodine, but also who should not be using iodine. So if you're making this as a present for someone, make sure that you do not put the dulse in if somebody's got, for example, Hashimoto's disease. So Jean, who is my assistant, is going to be popping a recipe here for you. And I'm giving you the recipe in parts, which means that, for example, 2 parts of sesame seeds versus 1 part of dulse, 1 part of, means like, for example, if you're using a tablespoon, like the way I am today, is gonna be 2 tablespoons of sesame seeds, 1 tablespoon of, and then every tablespoon of each one of them, that's 1 part, right? So, and if you're doing that maybe in larger quantity, like the way my assistant Kate is here right now behind the camera, we're gonna be working on making a whole bunch of presents. So I'm actually making this as a gift for my staff, for my team, for a lot of my friends, for a lot of my colleagues, and we're gonna be shipping that out to them as a present. So kind of like I'm giving away secrets. But so what I'm gonna start off with first is my, I've already preheated my pan. Are we doing a little zoom in, Kate? So I don't know if you can see the, so we're just gonna leave this on like a mid heat. You know, the thing with roasting seeds is kind of, you're gonna be careful because it's like, it's looking good, and suddenly poof, it's gone, right? So we wanna do medium heat and gonna be like really babysitting it right now. So Kate, if I'm talking too much, would you just remind me like in maybe 3 to 4 minutes to take a look at this before we start seeing the fumes going off. All right. The other thing is, so the next thing we're going to be doing is let's basically make the salt part of the recipe. So let me just reorganize my spices here a little bit. Actually, let me put everything onto this side. There we go. So the first thing we're going to do is we're gonna use, because it is going to be a salt-based recipe. And if you have, for example, dealing with somebody who's got hypertension, not a big deal, just don't put the salt in, just make it into an herbal sprinkle, no problem. All right, so that's, I'm using pink salt here, but you can use any other sea salt, that's perfectly fine. The next thing we're gonna do is, because we're using 1 part each, right? So we're gonna do some rosemary. As you can see, if we can do a zoom in, Kate, as you can see, I'm using whole herbs. Can you see how like I'm not using powdered herbs here? And that's really important because, you know, if you follow me for a while, you know that when you're using powdered herbs, you breaking up a lot of their surface really to a maximum, and then that causes a lot of oxidation in those herbs, and it's kind of, you know, they lose their potency, they lose their flavor. I remember I'm using 1 tablespoon of sage next. I remember once staying with a friend of mine who was very proud to tell me that she had this herb, Herbe de Provence, as they call it, so Herbe de Provence, right? That spice mix from Provence, from France. And she said, I got it 10 years ago. And I thought, perfect. So I remember opening up the bottle and smelling and thinking, well, this could just well be ground furniture because I can't smell anything. It's just, it was completely, but it's not just devoid of smell, but it's also devoid of any nutritional qualities, any medicinal properties. And then the next thing we're doing is I'm doing 1 tablespoon of thyme that I was telling you about. And so the cool thing about this is that, you know, you can improvise however you want, right? So for example, if you personally don't like rosemary, right, just don't put it in. You know, if you want to put, rather you put parsley in there or dandelion leaves or whatever, it's really up to your imagination. Now, I wouldn't go to the point of grinding like the heck out of it. What I would suggest to do is just to pulse it just a tiny bit. Okay, and that's probably gonna be it. Yeah, so if we could do a zoom in, Kate, can we see that the herbs are, you can still see the quality of the herbs, like the debris, if you will, of the herbs, but it's not in a particularly powdery form. And, you know, and it's up to you. I mean, you can experiment what works better for you. I kind of like it a little bit when you, for example, bite on it and then you've got that pop of rosemary in your mouth, rather than making it too much of a powder. So then the next thing we want to definitely do is be watching these, and you can see, I don't know if you can see this on video, but we are getting to a point when they're becoming slightly brown. And that's what we want. The other test you can do, apart from color, is smell them. And they can definitely, this probably requires 1 more minute. In fact, I'm going to turn it off because there's still going to be heat coming off and we don't want to be burning it. So before, when you work with seeds, make sure that you want to cool them down first before doing anything with them, because otherwise they kind of like, they're going to destroy the medicinal properties of the herbs when you put hot seeds into your mix. So the next thing we're gonna do is, I'm gonna just do this as a demo, you guys, so forgive me, but I am gonna be just putting hot thing for now. But when you're doing the recipe, just let it sit here for like 15 minutes or so. Now half of it we're gonna grind up, and the other half we're just gonna use that more for visual purposes more than anything else, so that people can actually see the seeds in there. Okay, so I'm just gonna eyeball it, and there we go. That's about 1 tablespoon that's right in here. And the other one, we're gonna be using a grinder again. And it is pretty hot. Ooh. Ooh. So that was very ungraceful. And I got the seeds all over my counter, but that's what happens on, you might call it live television, right? I wonder whether Martha Stewart has ever had episodes like that. I can tell you, I have a friend who was showing one of the biggest bloopers of her career, how she was cooking with a celebrity, and her whole pan ended up catching fire when she was doing a salmon, and they basically had fire in the kitchen with the sprinklers going off. So okay, we want to grind it up to a nice powder. We don't want to be over grinding it, because then it becomes like a tahini, which is like a paste. So that's what I'm going to be putting in. And again, the most important thing is that you're really going to taste it and then decide if what it tastes like for you works for your palate, because you want to be proud of it when you are gifting it to someone, right? So we're just going to do a little bit of a blend. So you can see there's quite a bit of brightness that was brought into it because of the sesame seeds, right? One of the cool things that this comes with is this awesome silicone funnel. And Kate has helped me getting these labels done as well. So can we do a zoom in, Kate, on the bottle, on the jar itself? And if I turn it around, it says Magdalena's Magic Sprinkle, right? So really sweet gift that a few people are going to be receiving this season. Now the funnel, and I know you guys are going to be asking, where do you get the funnel from? The answer is, when you buy these bottles on Amazon, and I bought like 40 of them, then the funnel is part of the package. So it fits in very nicely. It gives you this wide mouth that you can then, don't have to worry about overspilling too much. And I'm just going to use my fingers. And this should give you, these proportions should give you probably about a whole jar of that sprinkle. So that was, if you remember, that was the parts. I was using 1 part of each, and there were, so it's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And Kate, did I put the dulse in? I don't think I did. Okay, so let me redo this, because I didn't put the dulse in. So I wanted to tell you about dulse, because this is a big part of this recipe. Now dulse is a kind of a seaweed, and I made the mistake of buying dulse in this form here, okay, like that. Can you see? Is that kind of clear? So this comes in a dehydrated form, but it's like dulse in the actual form that comes out from the sea. So this, it's not ground up. It's basically in that natural form. Now the problem with that is I was trying to grind it up this morning, and I wasn't getting a really fine grind, such as, for example, this one here. Okay, so for that reason, I would recommend don't buy. I mean, if you're buying this, buy it for other reasons, but not for this recipe. I got my powdered dulse from Mountain Rose herbs. In fact, all my herbs come from, I buy it either on Mountain Rose, or I buy it from Frontier on Amazon, or one more I'm forgetting, because I buy bulk because I'm using so much herbs typically. So we want to be using 1 part dulse here as well. And that's really where the name of the magic sprinkle came from. And that's the iodine part. So the interesting thing about iodine is that, and the reason why my friend's son felt so good, is because iodine, especially if you're deficient in it, can really be an amazing source of energy, okay? Also, as women, we have receptors for iodine in our breast, brain, the ovaries, and the thyroid, of course, right? So I can't tell you how incredibly energizing this sprinkle can be because of iodine. And so many people are deficient in iodine, so that really helps. However, who should never be dosing up on dulse, because this is really high in iodine. Nobody should be really doing any seaweed, apart from nori. Nori is very low on iodine, but all other seaweeds, dulse, kelp, arame, wakame, are high in iodine. People who have Hashimoto's and confirmed Hashimoto's disease, so hypothyroidism, from elevated antibodies, then what will happen, iodine would actually elevate their antibodies to make them feel even sicker. So it's kind of paradoxical, because on one hand you have a low thyroid function and you need that iodine, but on the other hand it actually makes you feel worse. And there's a whole mechanism behind it, which I'm not going to explain today, but if you can just trust me on that, that is the case. Now I want to tell you about what's kind of cool about the labels is that there is a company that, you know, when you go to like a stationery shop and want to buy those labels, I think, is it called Avery? Avery, yeah, so Avery. And the cool thing about them is that they have this code of what kind of a shape you can buy: round ones, small ones, big ones, right? This is just one type of a shape. And then you can go register online with their service. And all these designs, by the way, if you can do a zoom in, Kate, on you know, it's like a really beautiful seasonal design, like with, you know, we're in fall and there's some berries here. It's like very beautiful winter, fall design, right? It's already made for you. And all you have to do is, all Kate did was enter Magdalena's Magic Sprinkle, and then you print it out either at home if you have a color printer, or take it to FedEx or Kinko or whatever and get it printed out there. Super easy, right? You don't have to be an artist to do it. So, and that's what I mean by, you know, when you make that as a sort of a personal, as a personal present, it's just so much more meaningful, in my opinion. How many of you here, what have you received as a personal gift from someone that was like, had a really special meaning? You know, I remember last year a friend of mine knitted, it was her, like a, she was like a beginner knitter. She knitted a shawl for me because she's like, you're up in the mountains now, you need something warm. You know, it was very touching, and I do wear that shawl pretty often, especially at home too, because it's so warm. There you go. So sorry about that earlier. I forgot about this super important dulse. And then you use a little lid here, which is, what do you call that lid? The shaker, right? That's right. And that's pretty much it. That's your sprinkle. Okay. So I hope this was inspiring for you to start thinking about making some recipes for your friends. You know, the possibilities are endless. This is just one example here. You can just, you can make it far simpler than this. For example, just take salt, some maybe lemon peel, and some garlic, and dried onion, you know, pulse it a little bit like that, make it as a gift as well. Whatever your heart desire, just use your imagination. Jean, so let's see what are the questions that we have that came in. And hey, you guys, I'm gonna be making another video after this, which is gonna be called the Orange Digestive Pastille, which is something like a little treat after dinner, which is one of my favorite recipes, and which can also be a wonderful gift. So if you wanna stay on for that, then do so. We're gonna hang up this video and we're gonna do another one right after. So Jose is asking, I have hypothyroidism but not Hashimoto's. Should I use dulse or not? I didn't quite understand. Yes, so Jose, the answer is yes, you can. But I really want to encourage you to make sure you have ruled out Hashimoto's, because 90% of people who have hypothyroidism have it because of Hashimoto's. So the chances of you not having Hashimoto's is pretty limited, unless you have really tested for antibodies and you're negative. Then you're good to go. All right. Do we have any other questions, Jean? Let me know. I hope you guys like the recipe. And let's, yeah, and I hope to see you for the next video. All right. Have a great weekend. Bye, everybody.